How do you recruit and retain happy agents? I'm on a mission to answer that question by talking with the unsung heroes that empower real estate agents. I'm Seth Price. Tune in each week as I sit down with back office heroes to learn what's working and what's not. Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's Seth Price here, Empowering Agents Live. Super excited to have folks on. Today, we're going to jump in on a topic that many of you don't know. I used to run support teams years and years ago, answering the phones, trying to help people solve problems quickly is a lot easier said than done, especially when you're not knowledgeable about every last thing. And so we're going to talk about setting up some systems and how to really streamline the chaos that happens when you're trying to support agents. One of the things that I see with working with brokerages and teams is, hey, it's not always easy to set yourself apart when it comes to delivering happiness to your agents. It's really easy to promise a lot of stuff, and always best intentions are there in delivering on that. But you've got all these levels of need. You've got really experienced agents that maybe don't want anything to do with you because they know how to run their business. Maybe they need a few of the things that you've promised. They want those things set up really fast, and then they want to be left alone. And then you've got newbies who need all the help in the world. And then you also have, some of the technically challenged, like folks that are not digital natives, even using the fancy phones that they have are hard. Finding the emails that you sent them is hard. Like all of that stuff just gets to be a bit of a challenge. But the thing that we know today is that we all expect a certain level of service, and speed is a component of that service. And one of the challenges with wanting to do everything fast is that, you can't be everywhere at once. And that's one of the biggest challenges of the back office is sort of this desire from the folks that you're supporting for immediate help. And certainly your desire to deliver that quickly. But there is the reality of there's only so many hours in the day. And as much of a cape that you'd like to put on and be, Superwoman and Superman, there's only so much you can do. I've worked with a bunch of brokers and thinking about how they do their back office and how they do their help desk. And so I wanted to share some of the best practices that I've seen out there. So I think the first thing is sort of the thinking about, what is a help desk is a good start. I'd say in basic terms, a help desk is, sort of a central online hub where agents can ask to talk to you. It's one place that they know, because I think one of the challenges that many brokerages fall into and many teams fall into is if there's no plan on how they're going to get their help, they're going to start emailing, asking, texting everybody who's the wrong person, especially if they don't know what to do, right? They're going to ask the person that recruited them. They're going to ask possibly the broker in charge, which is, probably not the right person to ask. And what you really want to do is you want to create a culture where people feel like they can get an answer without everyone having to scramble, and being organized enough so that agents know where to go. In the best case scenario, you're designating a go-to, I'll say tech. It doesn't all have to be tech, but a go-to point person at the brokerage, and potentially one for the different areas that you're supporting, that people know that they can go to that person and they can ask a question, and in a reasonable amount of time, they're going to get an answer to that question. One of the things that I've seen is that without a resource, meaning a help desk of some sort, and a resource for all the tools that you provide, how-to articles, where to find the information for how to reset your password, even, where's the Wi-Fi in the office that this person might be working in? You're just going to answer that question over and over and over and over again. And, too many brokerages just aren't giving agents a dedicated way to ask for that support. And the result is the agent's plan to get help is I'll just call the broker owner or the front desk, which I'm sure that sounds familiar to some, but it's sort of a plan for a little bit of a chaotic nightmare. And so one of the simple ways you can do just on the comm side is we use Slack in our company. I work with quite a few brokerages that use Slack in their organization. You could also use Facebook Workplace. You could use something else, but a comms tool that allows a person to go in and ask a simple question or some sort of group, source solution that's in a protected and internal environment. And that's key. It needs to be protected because you don't want folks outside of your organization to be seeing conversations where you're asking maybe things that have to do with the transaction. Like you just want to make sure that everything is compliant and private. Another thing to do is to set up maybe a techhelp@yourcompany.com, a dedicated internal email that everyone can send a support request to or a help request to. That way you can make sure that you could distribute that to multiple people on your team. You could also, if you're using a tool like Slack, you could make sure that it goes directly into Slack, which is a really easy thing to set up in Slack. It has this dedicated forwarding that you can do there. And then what happens with that is with that designated email, you can make sure that that email goes to different people or groups without asking the agent to change their behavior. Because we all know that that's sort of difficult, right? You want to make it as easy as humanly possible, and then ideally as fast as humanly possible to get a response. And so when I think about a few of those things, let's talk about setting up your help desk. First, you want to decide, what support is this going to deliver? Is this like soup to nuts? Are you doing, training with this, tech support with this, compliance with this, or do you have different areas in which you want people to go to? Traditionally, help or support desk are places for receiving sort of basic support, things that can be answered very quickly, and then they would be escalated. Let's say if it were, coaching or help with a transaction, you would go, oh, we're going to escalate this to the broker in charge, or we're going to escalate this to compliance. Or if it's a pure tech item, like, hey, I need help with my website and its SEO, you might have someone on staff, or you might have a relationship like with a partner like ours, and you go, oh, we're going to connect you to our point of contact. Those are ways that you want to think about those flows so that you're not trying to figure that out on the fly, which makes it a little bit difficult for the agent if they're wondering when they're going to get a response. That certainly doesn't lead to happiness. Help desk can also be expanded to include company-wide requests. So if you think about you sort of want a place that becomes a central hub for all of the sort of relationship comms with agents, because while it can be great to go, hey, I'm going to respond personally to each individual, that just doesn't scale. And so, it's possible to do. I know that it's possible, but it means that you just need to add more humans. And that's cool too, if that's the path that you want to take. But just know that scale is required with more human touch. And so I have experienced both sides of it, which is we just hire a lot of admins and support people. the more agents you need to support and the more, I'll say, offerings that you provide to them. So if you're providing a lot of software and that software is complex and you really want people to use it, you're not just providing it as a checkbox. You sort of need your team to know how those tools work, or you need a relationship with your vendor that they're going to help you support, or you're just going to provide really good documentation, whether it's a Loom walkthrough or videos provided by your vendor partner that you're going to put in your help desk knowledge base. And it's going to be self-serve. You're like, hey, great. I see that you have a problem with the CRM that we provide. Here's a list of videos you could look to help yourself. I want to be honest, people generally don't like that. I mean, we can just all think from our own experiences. It's nice to provide the videos, the help desk videos, but people just want the answer to the question that they have. They don't want to have to watch a 5-minute video and look at all the FAQs to get their question answered. So just know that that's human nature. And then you want to determine, I'll say, number 2, the staffing needs of this. Whose responsibility is it going to be to monitor, one, that dedicated email that you decided to set up? And 2, if you decide to use Slack and you have a help channel, who's monitoring that help channel? Because it can't be a pop fly. Because if it's no one's job, like no individual's job, it's not going to be any individual's job, or it will be begrudgingly. Like people will go, I guess no one's answering that, I'll answer it. And that is not going to lead to a really high quality service experience. So that's really a super important one, is who is going to handle it and who's going to answer those questions. And then that person can be the gatekeeper. And so what I mean by that is, if they get questions that they can answer, they answer them really quickly and they respond. If they get questions that they don't know the answer, but they know someone who does, they will connect the question to the right resource and make sure that it gets answered. So that's sort of what the gatekeeper does. The other one is sort of define your priorities. Like, what's the right balance of, I'll say, questions that you feel like you can answer with a tool and questions that you really feel like you need to get on the phone with someone. Because as much as technology and automation is all great, there is a point where you really solve things by listening to the question behind the question. Because sometimes someone will ask a simple question, but they really have a bigger problem. It's like someone expresses frustration around their CRM, but it turns out like they actually haven't set the CRM up, or they don't know how to use the CRM, or they don't know how to get all their contacts in, but that's not the question that they asked. And so sometimes jumping on the phone becomes the way in which you get a little bit deeper to really understand someone's frustration. And then you can solve it from there. So define your priorities. Like, what do you want to accomplish with the help desk? And so my suggestion would be speed to response. So just so people have a single point of contact and they're going to get an immediate, I heard your question, I'm looking for an answer, or I heard your question, here's the response, or I heard your question, here's my Calendly link, let's schedule a time so I can help you. Like, those are all ways to show responsiveness. And so that could be a way, that would be my recommendation. Also, on a similar note, you could decide that you want to go a step further with your help desk and do something that's a little more formal. There's a lot of help desk tools out there that will create a ticket when you do one. One of them is called Help Desk. There's Zendesk. There's just tons of them out there at different price points. You could sort of roll your own too. Asana is a great project management tool. You can use that. I've I work with some brokers that use that tool. So there's no one right tool. It just depends on the scale in which you're trying to solve this problem, and how much you want to invest in it. So after that, you sort of want to create some what I'll call canned responses, or the knowledge base. I referenced this a few times, but this is really, really critical, because think of it like frequently asked questions, right? Especially if you've been in your role for a period of time, you get asked the same questions, or many of the same questions, over and over and over and over again. So I think of these canned responses as they need to have a home where where you can have links to them. So you can send people links that are automated. Maybe they're not automated at the start, but you could at least copy it and send it to someone. And that home also allows for self-discovery, right? Meaning that you will have some agents that actually don't want to talk to you, and they'd like to solve the problems themselves, but they need to know where to go. And that's where the knowledge base comes in. And so there's a few ways to think about a knowledge base. Public and private. Those are the first two decisions. I've seen a lot of successful brokerages do a public version of their knowledge base, that some of the items, you hit a login wall that force an individual that's an agent in your brokerage to have to log in so they can see it privately. It serves twofold when it's public. It's to let potential agent recruits know that you have lots of different things that you provide. So an example would be, your knowledge base should probably include, all of the different tools that you support. So imagine you have a transaction management tool, and maybe you have a CMA tool, and maybe you have a website tool, and maybe you have a CRM. Like all of those things, you would want to showcase that, that's maybe your tech stack. Maybe it includes other things in your tech stack. You probably want to include the different types of training as things that people could find out about. You probably want to learn, licensure and sort of community information, whatever the FAQ that is consistent through the process of being recruited, onboarded, and oriented as a new agent, and also just being an existing agent in your org. What are the things that people ask repeatedly? So that's the public version. The private, same concept, is that you would just need to log in to access that information. The reason canned is really valuable is that you do have turnover in your org. Like that's just, some people are fortunate enough to have the same broker in charge forever and the same, back office admins forever. But life being what it is, hey, people move on. And so without that information documented, you're sort of at the mercy of the institutional knowledge of the people on your team. And God forbid one of them leaves, it's really a nightmare to come up to speed quickly to understand all the information. And so having it in a well-documented place that you can then update on a regular basis, and then multiple people can use, super, super valuable. I do want to mention that they're, and I'll say a low tech, still techie, low cost way to do it is to use Google Docs, because you can do permissions with that. There's some workarounds you need to do to make sure every time you add someone that they have permissions, especially if your org doesn't use your brokerage, email domain. So if you had Seth@mybrokerage.com and everyone has that type of email, that's really easy, because you can say anyone with at my, brokerage.com can have access to this doc. No problem. But the Google Doc one is actually pretty good because you can do a knowledge base uh, in all the Google tools as long as you're already paying for them pretty inexpensively. Um, so moving on, a few things. Once you have your, canned responses and your knowledge base set up, then what you can do is, depending on the software you're using. So I don't want to presume too much, but if you've chosen to use a help desk software, like Help Scout is a really great one. I love it. Groove HQ is a really great one. I love it. If you do a homegrown version, you'll have to figure out autoresponders on your own. But one of the things you can do is, if someone asks a question like, hey, what's the Wi-Fi password? You can have canned responses that just sort of plug in all the right response, that FAQ answer right there. That may be a little, advanced, and you don't need to go there right away. But I guarantee you, if you're at scale in supporting lots of agents, oh my God, it'll save you so much time that will be so incredibly valuable for you to set that up. Because one of the things that you're trying to do is with speed is you're trying to answer those questions really, really quickly and really efficiently and consistently. Because the thing you don't want to do is give people the wrong information. So that's really helpful. There's another tool that I've seen work really well. It's Notion.so. It sort of took over where Evernote sort of fell asleep. Like, Evernote was really great. And I remember, it took real estate by storm. Everyone in real estate was using Evernote. Still a decent tool. So nothing wrong with that. You could use Evernote as your knowledge base as well. Notion really has comms in it as well. So it's sort of next level. Really great tool. I use it for personal note keeping. I don't use it as a help desk. We don't use it as a help desk at Placester. Just want to let everybody know that. But I have seen it used very successfully for creating a help desk that has onboarding docs for brokerages. Really, I'd say, cost effective and really easy to use. And then I think, I think one of the things that I would say in implementing this is, you want to get to a point where you're thinking about, this is sort of help desk 2.0, is thinking about stats. Is one of the challenges with creating help desk, creating a knowledge base for agents, is trying to figure out what's the right channel to drive people to so you get consistent usage. Because you're sort of going to find that you may pick a channel. Let's say you use email. I hate email, by the way, but let's say you use email as you create this dedicated email for help, and people don't use it. You have two choices. You sort of have to just continue beating the drum, the mantra, so it gets ingrained that everyone uses. You just have to ride it out. Like, don't give up too early. Or you may have to experiment with other modes, like Slack is a perfect one. If your organization is already using Slack, Slack is probably ideal because you've already developed the muscle and the habit that people will use that tool to communicate with each other. And so that's why I say you're sort of going to have to do two things. One is, you're going to have to make a commitment. We're going north, and you're going to have to stay the course, because, any structure and organization requires two things. It requires some sort of a leader that's going to bang the drum, and it requires commitment, right? Because it takes a little bit of time to get everyone to adopt, and you got to do, one part sales, one part coaching, and one part cheerleading. And if you are depending on who you are as a human, one part being a little bit bitchy to get people to do stuff, right? That's sort of like, that's the mix in which you're trying to herd cats. So that's that piece. I'd say the consistency is really key because without the consistency, you may do all this work and then just bail on it. And people would say that it didn't work. And like any good system, it only works if you work it. And so I would say, don't give up. There are countless stats that show how effective a help desk and a knowledge base is in any organization. I didn't want to fill this thing with stats because I find them boring, but there's no doubt that this is one of the most effective ways to increase the time to respond to agent support request or agent help request. And it tends to lead to higher NPS. So net promoter score. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, great weekend, and keep rocking it. Thanks so much.